want to start off with saying is that, there's two different ways of getting together and learning and being inspired. One way is to give a formal class. Ezzy and I could sit here and dictate, Torah, and the Torah says this and the Torah says this, and these are the biblical figures that were married, and say it like that. Or another way, there's a Hasidic term called a farbrengen. Have any of you heard of the term farbrengen before?
I have, but I can't remember. It's redefine it, please.
There we go.
Yeah, Eitan, that's great. What's a farbrengen? You want to tell us?
It's
a community?
Something. Oh.
Is it a community?
You're on.
Hasidic get together.
Yeah.
Get together.
What did the yeah?
Yeah.
What did the Hasidim do when they farbring?
Oh,
They eat and drink and talk.
Yes. Well, the drinking is to help facilitate, but the goal is not the drinking. Well, the difference between a class and a farbrengen, again, the class would be like Ezzy and I sitting here and sharing some intellectual information. And a farbrengen is where a group of people get together to discuss a topic where there's back and forth, hashing it out, being authentic, sharing what works, what doesn't work, asking questions, and getting down to the bottom of something where there's like real emotional, hopefully real emotional change and inspiration, that it's really, really authentic. So mine and Ezzy's goal is to get together and have a farbrengen where we're here together with other couples, and to share really like our real journey, not to sit here and preach, but to talk about our journey. We've been married for 15 and a half years, and talk about some of the trials and tribulations and lessons along the way that we've, grown and come to how to, strengthen our emotional intimacy. And really, we hope to hear from you as well, and have this as a group discussion. So feel free at any point to jump in. So I'm gonna start. I'll say like this. I'll never forget when we got engaged. Ezzy, I was living here in California. Ezzy was in New York, so I flew in a few times to visit him. And whenever we would walk down the street and we would see people who knew us, they would say, "Oh, the young couple, the engaged couple," and then they would say all kinds of interesting comments like, "Oh, good luck to you guys," or "Enjoy the fun while it still lasts," or like, "Ezzy, enjoy being a free bird, like, good luck, it's not gonna last long." And we would just look at each other and we'd be like, what's up with that? Like, what's wrong with everyone? It's like, we're getting married, come on, it's like the best thing ever. Why are everyone making all these snide comments? And then
I remember everybody saying these things, and I'm thinking, I don't know about your marriage, I don't know about their marriage, we're not going to have such problems. But we're not going to have such challenges. Our life is going to be perfect. And then as time goes on, you begin to realize that maybe you don't have problems, but you're like everybody else.
Yeah. So, and then I just wanted to add that, after a Jewish wedding, we have what's called the Sheva Brachot, right? The 7 nights of parties. So, and every night they were eating at someone else's house or restaurants, and there's a bunch of speeches, and all the speeches about marital issues and how to have shalom bayis, how to get along. And I'm like thinking, this is so boring. Come on, like, why in the world is everyone talking about how to get along? Like, we just got married. It just all seemed so, we couldn't relate. But like, as you said, like all couples, at some point or another, the little honeymoon fantasy bubble does pop, and you start, hitting reality, facing reality, and you realize like, wow, hi Karen, welcome. You start realizing that like, wow, maybe, all the promises in the world and all the expectations and fantasy, maybe this is not a reality, and marriage really, really takes work. So before we continue, I'd love to get your input. What do you think are some of the main factors that contribute to relationships being as difficult as they are, as like that it takes as much work to make a relationship work? Any comments or thoughts?
I don't get.
Come on, guys. Don't be shy.
Are there problems with the relationship?
What was that?
People are different. People are
Yes.
different. We met when we were 19. We got married when we were barely 21, and we were immature.
Yes.
And
We didn't know anything. We
We
just
didn't
said,
know
"Oh, we're
anything.
getting married. It's fun. It's
well, no,
great.
we
We'll
were
have."
in love.
We were in love,
committed.
of course.
Yeah,
I was going to ask, are you guys Chabadniks? You got married too young?
You know, I was gonna say exactly. I was 21 when we got married. So
I know. Don't
but
forget,
wait.
this was 53
this was
years ago.
In the 1960s, we were not typical.
We just,
So, yes.
we never thought about anything. We never thought about, we just
We loved each other.
and we were going to get married, make it work, and everything was going to be fine. There were no help, self-help things and people to talk to about it. We just
Yeah.
went along with it. And all of our friends that got married when we did, when they met at 19 and 20, 21, are all 50, 55 years married. It's
amazing.
It's amazing. It is amazing.
We've all attracted, because we've all been attracted to each other, so
As
that,
couples.
right. There's plenty of people who have not
course.
made it, but that's just personalities. So as humans, we have to understand, I can say this,
Now,
you have to understand, now, you have to understand that, there's differences, but there's a basic commitment
and love.
and
Yeah.
love.
Yeah.
Not a commitment based on blind, but
No.
we had certain things in common that we
Values.
connected with that superseded everything, transcended everything
Yes.
else.
That's beautiful. So before we jump to like what made it work, I just want to collect a bit of information of what the challenges are. So what you guys said is so true. It's like in a certain way, I think even whether you're 20 or 30, a lot of times when you begin a new relationship or you get married, you're immature still on some level. So you come in maybe naive, is kind of what you guys said. I have a few thoughts that I want to share, but I want to hear if anyone else has any thoughts that they want to add. Karen, you want to say something? Hi. Hi, Or. You don't have to. We don't hear. We don't hear you.
Unmute.
So I'll just say one thing that for me, while giving everybody the opportunity, today's class is focused on the emotional and physical intimacy portion of marriage. And when we get married, we get married with this mindset of, it's all great and we're just on this road of, we're connected. And we don't. I think Chuck and at least you guys were saying that at that age we were just excited and we were happy and we made it work. And life went on. But I think that for many people nowadays, in the past, and I was watching that Netflix series of Social Dilemma, I think it's called, and it's the way that the younger generation is getting married nowadays is a whole different world, because we are so impacted by TV and social media, and marriages nowadays are really from a different place. So I think that that's one of the big things that impact the marriages that we have nowadays.
Yeah. So we were thinking there's a few that we want to mention. One is like the TV, social media, book, romance books, image, like the lust kind of reality that's going on in the world. And then it plays with our understanding of what true love is. Another thing that I always think about is that the way God made the world is that he hooks us into like having kids and relationships, because there's the honeymoon stage, it's like babies are just so cute the first few years that it's like you're in this honeymoon stage and it's just like, oh my gosh, they're so cute, I want another one. But then it's like they grow up, you know. But imagine God didn't make them so cute. Like, who would have kids if they started at 14 years old, you know? So I think there's like an element of that in relationships where it's like there's that like fantasy and that lust and that like initial butterfly excitement that really is there to really get you hooked in, and not in a bad way, but really to get people to commit to relationships. And then it's like, now that you're here, okay, now the real journey is going to begin. And you know, it's like parenting, like real parenting starts at 4 or 5 when they're not quite as adorable. So that's another thing I was thinking about. I think also it's human nature to want, like, when we're feeling unsettled or lonely or not whole or just a little bit edgy about where we're holding in our life, to want change, and to like kind of have this hope that if there's something different than the reality now, then maybe that will bring me to all the feelings that I want and the fulfillment and the wholeness. And I'm thinking now, like, we're not getting into politics at all, but I just mentioning that, think about now, like America, you know, it's like, if you think about it in details, like, are any of the candidates really that great? You know, no, but it's like everyone just wants change. So it's like this fantasy every 4 years, like, oh, maybe this candidate, not because we really believe in the candidate, but we want something different than it is now. So there's that hope. So because a lot of us do have emotional unrest, you know, there's that fantasy that maybe if when I move on to this relationship and I get married, maybe, you know, hopefully that will make me feel different. And the fourth thing that I'm thinking is that, again, we're talking about what are the possible things that create challenge, is that energetically, we know we're attracted to what we know, number one, and also we're energetically attracted to where we're at in our life. So whatever we are used to, whatever relationship looked like to us, like let's say with our parents or with our siblings or wherever emotionally we are holding in our life, that's what energetically we're going to attract. So even though intellectually we're thinking, oh, you know what, if I get married, I'm going to be like uplifted out of my current state. But the reality is that unless we energetically shift and change and grow and evolve, we're going to attract what we know. So for example, if we had a very codependent relationship with a parent, or, you know, a certain dynamic, but we never really evolved out of that dynamic, even though we say we're never going to marry someone like our father or our mother, or we're going to move as far away as possible, like somehow we attract what we're comfortable with and what we know. It's really human nature until we change ourselves. So again, these are some things I wanted to put out onto the table.
So one of the things, first of all, before we go forward, does anybody have any additional thoughts
Or comments
on that?
Yes, Denise.
You have to unmute yourself.
I know. Thank you. So I'll just say that I think that life gets more complex, at least if you meet young. And I'll just say for us, right, like we met young and we didn't have kids and we didn't have all these other responsibilities. And I think that as life has gotten more complex, and particularly bringing little people into the world, there's so many more demands. And so one thing that Eitan and I talk about is like that our attention goes, you know, towards all these other things, right? Like our kids who need us and our careers and developing things in a different way. And that's very different, at least, than when we met. And we did have, you know, beginnings of careers, but, you know, we had all this time and energy that we had free, quote unquote, that we were able to devote to each other without there being an opportunity cost per se that was super obvious. And now it's just harder to come by that.
Yes.
I'll dovetail on what you just said. It's, you know, something that I very much relate to is when I started, or when Nechama and I got married and then moved out here to run Friendship Circle, and then eventually to run the Chabad as well. all we had was, we came here, it was just us, and Nechama was pregnant, and there was a little friendship circle, and life was great. And then we had a child, and then we had a second child, then we had a third child, then we began dabbling in the Chabad thing and had a fourth child, then we actually did Chabad and had a fifth child, and our mindsets, unless you're accustomed to cutting things out of the picture as time goes on, you end up having 5 children, 2 organizations, and a lot more responsibility. Plus you have, on top of that, you have a mortgage and you have other responsibilities that you need to deal with. And we've never cut out pieces from the back of the train. And so you end up carrying so much more weight, and you lose all that, that space that you once upon a time had. So I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
In addition, there's no handbook really for parenting or for relationships. So we're learning on the job. And a lot of us haven't really, we really don't have the tools or the skills at all. So it's a lot to navigate and to process.
So one thing that Nechama has mentioned in other classes, and is something that both Nechama and myself, if you ever hang out in my house, you'll hear there's no secrets. Everything is, we're pretty much open books. And the same thing in this class as well. You're going to hear, part of why we're not broadcasting it on Facebook Live is, you're going to hear some more intimate stuff of myself and Nechama, not too intimate, but more of our own life experiences. And we believe that, or I believe strongly that my own experience is the best experience for me to guide. Doesn't mean it's the only experience, and everybody's going to have their own experience and their own version of this experience as well. So in myself and Nechama, in our relationship, when I moved out here and when we got married, we came out with the mindset, traditional, if you read, traditional Chabad literature, or articles, you'll always see it's the husband and wife team. The husband and wife team, and they go out to here and they go out to there, and he does this and she does this, and et cetera, and they're both working 24 hours a day, and life is great. That's what it seems on the outside. But oftentimes, on the inside, the 24-hour-a-day job isn't always as smooth as it seems. And there's couples that are, and myself and Nechama included, is when we came out, it was a 24-hour-a-day job, but we also didn't have any of those kids that we talked about. And then when we had one kid, we jumped into a life that was going to be active with one kid, and then we jumped into a life that's active with 2 kids. And at a certain point, the life that you begin with isn't the life that you have anymore. But we're still carrying on the mindsets that we had from our past, and the mindset that I had when I got married was, oh, I'm going to be doing this, and my wife's going to be running all these programs, and life is going to be great. And then suddenly you have a child show up, and the child says, Daddy, I want your attention, or Mommy, I want your attention. You're like, I don't have space for you, and you don't mean that, but that's the messaging that will come across to the children sometimes. And that's the messaging that comes across to each other, is that we don't have that space. And we keep on turning to our spouse, or in the Chabad world, and again, in each person's situation, it's going to be something similar. And I kept on turning to Nechama and saying, Nechama, come on. Yeah, okay, you had a child, but you still we have an organization that we stepped up to run together. And we're no longer running it in that way. And, that's from my side. And then from Nechama's side, I'll let her say, from her side.
Well, from my side, and I think it's really important that I was talking about energetically, we're attracted to what we know, and or at the very least, we create a dynamic that we're used to. It's just because we don't really know any other way. So for me, I was very comfortable being in I'm going to be strong. I'm going to have it all figured out. I'm going to make everybody happy and fulfill the needs of everybody else, to the point that I'm martyring myself and lose myself in the process, because it's not really about me. It's about how I fulfill everyone else's responsibility, their own happipiness. So we fell into that dynamic, which it was good. I'm being a good wife because I'm, doing my duties and making sure Ezzy's happy and doing the work that I need to do. And we fell into this pattern of expectations and almost like rules and like a certain box. And, you know, now looking back, I would call it as almost like codependency or enmeshment, where it was like very much of like, you're fulfilling me and I'm fulfilling you. And, you know, I'll make sure you stay in the box of the expectations that I have for you. And like, we put each other in these roles and very much try to like keep ourselves in that role so that we both felt, you know, that we were having what we each needed.
And I would add, you know, not only we had different roles, ROLES, we also had different rules of the rules that I had for Nechama, and then the rules that Nechama had for me, based on my expectations and based on her expectations. And so what happens is, I'm here with my rules, she's here with her rules, and as a result, you have a very little amount of time for emotional intimacy, because you have so much expectation from one another, and you kind of have this distance between the two of you.
Yeah, and there's also certain things like, you know, the reality is that our parents were the ones that role modeled relationships. So like the way our father was with our mother is like, we have certain expectations of like, oh, that's what husbands do, you know? So there were certain things that like my father did with my mother that I was like, Ezzy, hello, you know, it's like, that's what men do. You know, you're supposed to do that. And he's like, where does it say that?
I'll give one benign example. Was the first Shabbat after we were married. It was, you know, it was candlelighting time, and it was within the 18 minutes, you know, when women light Shabbat candles, and Nechama's like, "Are you going to set up the candles?" And I looked at her and I'm like, "Me? Why would you want me to set up the candles?" Like that was not, because in my house, my father didn't set up the candles. So it wasn't something that I even in my wildest dreams thought about doing. And for Nechama, that's what her father did. And so it was almost like this expectation that my husband is going to set up the candles. And looking back, I laugh about it because it was all just expectations from our childhood, which weren't necessarily bad. It's not a bad thing that her father set up the candles, or it's not a bad thing that my father didn't. But the expectation was the expectations we had, and when we have such expectations, we put these roles and responsibilities, like we said before, on each other.
Right, and the big thing is like, we didn't know any different. So, you know, during that time, if you would have asked us, we would have said, of course, we have a great relationship, we get along, we're good partners, we work together, and we parent together, you know, and we do, you know, we're going. But now, as we've journeyed into a new reality and building true emotional intimacy and learning how to be our authentic selves, we could look back and realize like we were never truly able to be authentic, and we were never able to really relax and celebrate each other for who we were, because we were so busy being caught up in controlling the relationship and essentially like controlling each other, and like we can never really relax. I also want to say that again, that because the way God makes it is that your spouse will remind you about people in your childhood that have triggered you. It's just the way, the divine design. It's just, you can't avoid it. And the reason is because we're here to grow and to evolve and to heal. And you know, it's like whatever happens in our childhood that hurts us, it's like carrying a backpack with heavy rocks, and it's inside of us, like literally. And you know, it's like trying to climb Everest with this heavy backpack of rocks, and we don't even realize we're like taking a step and taking a step, and it's so heavy. But whenever we get triggered and things come up, and then we look at it and we release it, and we're like, wow, this is coming up, it's reminding me of this, and like we let it go, we're like shedding rocks, and we become more and more free, and we open up channels to become more authentic and more really connected to our truth. And so our spouse will always bring up stuff, and we will always, so what happened was with me and him, before we were aware of this, he would trigger me and remind me of stuff, and I would trigger him, and we would just get triggered, and then we would get into these cycles again and again and again and again, until we learned how to understand what these triggers are and how to heal from them and how to own that and take responsibility from that, we couldn't get out of those same vicious cycles.
I thought about rabbis and rebbitzins don't have such issues. Okay. So we're going to transition into, so this was really the introduction to what does the Torah has to say about this, and how do we develop a healthy emotional intimacy and physical intimacy with our spouse. So I'm going to pull up, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to pull up some, second if I can see this.
That's the wrong one.
No, it's below. There we go. Is that it? Yeah.
So we're in Parshat Lech Lecha now, which is the third parsha of Chumash Bereshis.
Right, it's not the right one.
So we took some quotes from Bereshit, Noach, and Lech Lecha, which are the part of the Torah that we're in now, and we're gonna discuss it because, so the bit, like what Ezzy said, the big question is like, okay, if this is the reality that energetically we're, married to someone who reminds us of our childhood stuff and we get triggered and we fall into these rules and expectations, well, how in the world are we supposed to heal from that? And how are we supposed to develop something sacred and emotional intimacy and build this authentic relationship that we really honor and cherish each other and bring out the best in each other? So we're going to journey you through that. You want to read this?
So
This is Bereshis. Here, read the...
So I'm going to read on verse 24, or we'll start at
23.
We'll start at 23. I should have emailed this out before so that you guys can see it closer. This is from a Chumash that takes the words of the Chumash and includes commentary as part of it. And
So the bold is the actual translation of the literal translation, and the non-bold is like commentary. And this is the portion where right after God creates Adam and Eve, like pretty much right afterwards.
okay, so starting at verse 23, the man said, and this is Adam, "This time, in contrast to all the creatures I examined previously, this one is bone from my bones and flesh from my flesh. She will be called woman," which in Hebrew is Isha, because she was taken from man, from Ish. Thus Adam completed the process of naming all the creatures, and God decreed that a man therefore leave his father and his mother and cleave only to his wife, forbidding extramarital relationships and some forms of incest, and that husbands and wives combine to become one flesh, and in their children. After separating them into man and woman, God blessed them, commanding them to procreate, and gave them the fruit of the earth as recounted above. So what we see very clearly here is,
Question.
what's that?
Yeah.
So, okay, so the question is, what does leaving your parents' home and cleaving to your wife have to do with extramarital relationships, some forms of incest, becoming one? What does this all have to do with one another?
You're gonna go.
Well,
Sorry. You're sure?
you should.
Okay, so yeah, so the big question is, like, you read this and it says, a man therefore leave his father and his mother and cleave only to his wife, forbidding extramarital relationships. So what's the connection? Any ideas? Like, why would God be telling man to leave his father and his mother in order to have, essentially oneness with the spouse?
Because
Yes, Karen, jump in.
because when you get married, you're forming your new family. So it's the same family, but like when I got married, and especially when we had kids, my mom and dad are still my mom and dad, and I love them with all my heart, but they just became one step lower than my husband and my kids. I love them all the same, but we're creating what they created with me, with us. So now that's the reason why God is saying this. Like, you have to realize to keep them in your heart where you're supposed to be. But now this is your new circle. I don't know. I hope I'm explaining this correctly.
Yeah.
So I'll repeat it back in a little bit differently. Is as long as we're still emotionally tied to our parents, we're always going to be our parents' children, but we're still the child and no longer the adult of this
Not
new
yet.
relationship. What was that?
Not yet.
Not yet. And we're still going to be tied to our parents in this new relationship. Like we were saying before, as long as we keep bringing in our parents into the relationship, we never become that spouse. We become the extension of the parent. There's something beautiful when a parent says, "I've now gained another child." That's beautiful. But the real truth is, I've now set my child off into the world for them to create a life and to become one.
So another thing I just want to add is that, what happens is that in order to really begin to create a very healthy dynamic and a healthy relationship, leaving our parents on an emotional level means, of course, it doesn't mean not emotionally being connected to our parents and loving our parents. And, on the 10 Commandments, it says, honor your mother and your father. That means that we're bound to respect forever, till the day they die, like, calling them and visiting them and showing them gratitude for giving us our life. Like it's a duty and a responsibility to stay connected. But what it means leaving them is that as long as we stay in that like child that's like still seeking that love and validation from our parents, where it's like, give me that love, give me that security. As a child, when we're born, we don't really know who we are. We don't really know, we're kind of helpless, right? Like we depend on our parents to nourish us on a physical level, right? Like give us clothes and food and basics, but also on a deeper level, like, hold us when we're scared and teach us about life and tell us that we're okay and nourish us and build our confidence. But if we never like really own that and mature in the sense of like owning our own emotional well-being and do the work to really heal and mature inside, then we'll always still be that little child chasing that love and that validation outside of ourselves. And yeah, we might not be looking for it from our parents anymore when we get married, but we continue that kind of chase in the relationship where we'll get married and then we'll still be that little boy or little girl wanting that reassurance or that validation or the reassurance from our spouse. You wanted to say something?
They always defended
I
you.
agree.
So one thing I'll add on top of that is that once we let that go and we become comfortable as a spouse with each other, then we're whole, and then we can turn back to God and say, we're complete. Hashem, provide for us and connect to us, and we're ready to receive from you as a complete unit.
So I want to expand on this a little bit. Like, how do we, again, we're not talking literally about emotionally disconnect. We're not talking about emotionally disconnecting from our parents. We're talking about like healing and filling up that inner child inside of us. I don't know if all of you guys know the concept of like, outside we're adults, but inside, like I have a little girl, Nechama, Ezzy has a little boy, Ezzy, inside. Like we all have that like little boy or little girl inside of us that's still looking for that like reassurance and that love and that validation. It's like, no matter how old we are, there's that little young kid inside of us that until we like build this relationship with our inner child, it could stay 3, it could stay 6, it could stay 8. It stays as a little child, and like it's looking for that external reassurance or that higher power. And so leaving our parents means healing, building a relationship with our inner child and like maturing and healing and becoming an adult where you're not constantly looking to other people to fulfill you and give you and nurture you and take care of you, but you become an adult where you look at another person and you could say, I'm whole, I'm full, and I'm overflowing, and I want to give you love, and I want to see you, and I want to celebrate you, and we're both whole people. So how do we do that? So now, actually, this week's Torah portion is Lech Lecha, the whole story where Abraham was asked to leave his father's home and journey to become Abraham, the forefather of the Jewish people. And it's very interesting because, sorry, Dania wrote, so you're not saying to transfer it from parents to partner, right? What I'm saying is that if we don't actually go on a journey to emotionally heal the things that we're looking for inside of ourselves, then we can't help it. But when we get married, we're gonna turn to our spouse and expect them to fulfill us in the same chase that we've been looking for our parents or from other people in our life. It's like, if we're not whole inside, and we aren't ever whole until we heal. Like, I mean, it's a journey to become whole.
I'm going to just clarify from my perspective is that it's not necessarily healing from the past. In cases, it does need to be healing from the past, but it's really about letting go from our past. And if we don't let go from our past, then we're forever holding on to that, and we're not, and we're going to talk about this soon, we're not connecting fully with our spouse. So just to, I'm going to jump a little further, and then we'll come back to this point, a little bit more in depth. So in the beginning of this week's Torah portion, we talk about Abraham leaving, as Nechama said, leaving the land of leaving Haran and going to Canaan, to the land which eventually is Israel, Dagab Shom. So what it says in there is like this: in the year 2023, and I have this kind of block on the screen. In the year 2023, God said to, and this is not.
Wait, does everyone see it?
Yeah, they see it. They see it. This is not in 2 years, but this is on the Jewish calendar in the year 2023. God said to Abraham, "You have left your homeland and birthplace by moving to Haran. Now go even further away from your land and from your birthplace. Go away from your father Terach's home in Haran to a land that I will show you." So it's, and I'm skipping a lot of the commentary, but it's leave your home, leave your land, your birthplace, your father's house, to a land that I will show you. So what? So what are we saying here? Is we're saying that in order to, and this is not in regards to marriage, this is in regards to building the relationship of
Becoming your best self.
becoming the Jewish people. This is what it's referring to, but it's applicable here as well, is that in order to become the Jewish people, they had to leave their land, their upbringing. They had to leave their birthplace. They had to leave their father's home. And they had to go to a land that I will show you. They had to go to a new world or a new place that was unknown. Yeah.
I want to say that it's interesting that Lech Lecha, it's actually translated, some people say like go for yourself, but actually the literal translation, we have some Israelis here, right? Lech Lecha is go to yourself. So there's a big question, like if God is coming and revealing himself to Abraham and saying, go to yourself, like leave your father's house, become this great nation. Why is he saying go to yourself? Because it's actually a metaphor for all of us, for people from Avram all the way down, till now, is that the journey of him leaving his father's home to become the great Abraham is the journey that we all need to go on in order to become our best self. It's like that authentic journey of leaving our restraints and our things that hold us back from being our best selves and journeying into becoming whole. So, another question is like, why does it have to say like your land, your birthplace, your father's house? Like it's pretty repetitive, and the Torah is usually not very repetitive. It's usually very careful with its words, and it only says, and the answer is because in order to really become like, grounded and whole and know yourself and ready, Abraham, he trailblazed a path of giving. He wasn't even like Noah before him. He was great, and he was good enough that he was able to be saved in the ark, and he didn't die, but he was very much for himself. He didn't make an impact, but Avram went on such a deep journey of transformation and healed himself so much and knew who he was, that he wasn't looking for himself. Every day he woke up and what does God need from me? What does the world need from me? And the journey he went to, he left his land. And I want to just say in short what these each represent. The land represents society and peer pressure. You know, it's very hard to become, you know, grounded into your authentic self and feeling like you're not looking outside of yourself to be fulfilled. When you're looking outside of what do my neighbors say, you know, what is everyone at work doing, and what's the expectation, and what, you know, social pressure and peer pressure and social status, and you know, what's the expectation of me? As long as we live with that, then we can't ever really journey and learn to build this relationship with ourselves where we feel really whole, because we're constantly living in fear of the expectations and trying to fit in. So that's the land. And then our birthplace is like our nurture and our nature. Like there's certain character that's been very ingrained in us. You know, it's like where we say like, what do you expect of me? Like I've always been this way. I always get angry, you know, when I don't get my way, or like ask my mom, like I've been this way since I was 2 years old. This is just my character. So it's like, yeah, you know, we are ingrained in certain ways, or like, you know, naturally in certain ways, but are we willing to go beyond our birthplace, beyond our natural, our nature, our instinctive, you know, behaviors? And are we willing to like look at that and to be like, how can we get beyond that? And our Father's home is, you know, it's like all those voices in our head that's like, you know, our parents had, sometimes we don't know like what's really our voice or our parents. It's like, you should do this and you need to be this and you need all this expectations that's like ingrained in our head from like people in our childhood that like kind of formulated for us like what success looks like, or how we need to perform, or how we need to be. And so this week's Torah portion, I wanted to bring this in because I think it's so important. It's like, you know, again, it says it in Bereshit, and then it says it again here, like the journey to becoming whole, where we're really ready to give to someone else and contribute and not look to someone else to fulfill us, is like, we have to be willing to go on this journey of facing ourselves. And are we willing to not, you know, to be unique and not, thank you, not live our lives based out of fear of trying to be like everyone else? Are we willing to like look into our character and refine that? Are we willing to like question the voices in our head of based on people have decided for us how life needs to be, and question them, be like, what do I value? What do I feel is important? Anyways, again, I mean, that conversation deserves like a whole class in itself, but I want to at least like touch on that as best as possible. And what was that? Oh, okay. Yeah, fine. No, well, I'll just actually say it in 1 minute.
Okay.
So I want to tie in a couple more things. That a big question is like, how do we do that? You know, it's like, it's almost like, you know, like we started off in the beginning, right? Like Danit was saying, you know, we have our kids and we have our careers and we have a work and everything. And it's like so hard to like even find time to nurture our relationship. And now it's like, you're saying, oh, figure out how to like nurture yourself and get to know yourself and journey into your authentic self. Like, you know, it sounds like almost impossible. So I just want to say a comment about like last week's Torah portion with Noah, right? How he goes into the ark for a whole year. And like the world was chaos with floods and everything, and he had to be in the ark. And this represents that like, in order to do this journey, like we really need to, the world is chaotic and there's so many things pulling us in a million directions. And the whole story of Noah represents like, in order to become our best selves, like we need to nurture ourselves and need to go into our own oasis, into our own ark. We need to like find time to listen to ourselves, to listen to our own soul, to listen to what's true for me. How do I nurture myself? What's coming up for me? What do I feel? What do I need? It's really important, because otherwise we're just like pulled in a million directions and we don't even know what is our truth and who we are, and we can't really show up authentically. So I want, yeah. So you're gonna say this?
Yeah. So one of the things that when we're talking about, so we've left we've left the land of Haran. We've left our parents' home. We've left our birthplace, and we go to this land that I will show you. This land that we go into the unknown, and I think it's important just to share that, on mine and Nechama's journey, and I'm sure everybody has in their own journeys this unknown that they've gone to, and then this unknown that they've come to, is that we eventually found this way for Nechama to accomplish and thrive in the areas where she thrives, and for me to thrive in my areas. And what I mean by that was, instead of me turning to Nechama and saying, Nechama, I have all these expectations from you, I turned inward and I said, what expectations do I have of myself? What needs do I have of myself? Where can I find those needs? It doesn't mean that Nechama can't be my spouse and be my support. In the Torah, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, it says that the wife is the Ezer Kenegdo, is the support opposite the husband. So a wife and a husband are support for each other. So it doesn't mean I couldn't turn to Nechama for support, but I stopped relying on her. She doesn't become the foundation of my existence. She becomes the support of my existence. And I began to find that elsewhere, turning to mentors, turning to other people that can help me in my growth, turning to developing a men's cohort, a men's group where I can spend time and where I can grow, whether it be in business, whether it be in Torah, whatever it may be. And Nechama at the same time began to develop her own growth and her own partners, her women's groups and her groups of people where she can grow and she can thrive. And suddenly the expectations are no longer of Nechama, the expectations are of myself and how I can change, and really also lowering the expectations, and again, not making it belittling the expectations, but lowering the threshold of what I need to be considering to be considered successful. I need what I need regardless of Nechama, and then Nechama needs what she needs regardless of me, but then we can come together and become one.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I would just add, like, connecting that to like Noach being in his ark, for a year. It's like both of us like really went through this journey of like self-reflection and like discovering our authentic self. And it was very profound because I was so caught up in like fulfilling the expectations that I had for Ezzy, carried on from my childhood of fulfilling a certain expectation for others. And also like trying to keep him in a box so that he fulfills my needs, that it was like this codependency where it's like you fulfill me and I fulfill you, but then you can never really just like relax into your full self. So like this like going into the ark, it was like what Ezzy was saying, it's like we began to be like own our own journeys and our own needs. And I realized, like, as a woman, we live in a society, it's honestly, I'm going to say straight, it's so messed up, like, that we expect, like, our spouses, like, you get married and, like, you don't need anyone else. Like, if, like, your husband's your best friend and you're your husband's best friend, and, like, they should fulfill everything. And it's like, we're not in a society now where, like, women are spending time and nurturing their, like, feminine energy with other women and men with other men. Like, it's like your husband, no matter what, like I'm saying to you women out here, will always think you're a bit crazy. Like, we're all over the place. We're emotional, we're creative, we're abstract, we're just like, our brains are not in a box. And like men somehow, like, it's like 1 + 1 = 2 and like they're done, And like, I know for me with Ezzy, it was like, always like, you're so intense, you're so deep, you're so complicated, you're so this, you're so that, just like move on. And it's like, and if like he's my only point of reference, then I thought like I had to change, like I'm too much. And it was like, when we went on this independent journey where he started like finding like men friends and like doing things like, oh, I love skiing and I want to hang out with my friends and I want to like read these things and I want to do these things. And I was like, started connecting to more, again, female friends. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like we think the same. And like opening up and being vulnerable and like I started doing things that I haven't done since I was like 19 and 20 that I'm like, wait, I love this stuff, you know? I started playing guitar again. I haven't been doing it since I was a teenager. I'm like, this is self-expression for me. I love it. Like, there's just because we're married and have kids doesn't mean that I am lost. Like, I need to do things. And the more and more and more we found things to fulfill ourselves, and like me, I had my own emotional support. He had his emotional support. We weren't, like, as you said, we weren't so dependent on each other. And like, I felt full at the end of the day, and he felt full at the end of the day. And when we both sat down on the couch and like, I'm happy, he's happy. And it's like, hey, let's share some, like, our joy together. Like, tell me about all the great people you spoke to today and all the fun things you did and things you're excited about. And it was like two people that didn't depend on each other for like oxygen. And we could just, I started really celebrating Ezzy for the things he was excited about. And also, like, we realized, like, we're so different and our brains think differently, and that's so cool, and it's okay. And it's like, I could listen to him about the things that he's interested in, and he could listen to me, because again, we have other people in our life to support us. We've already done things to fulfill us. We've already given ourselves oxygen and fulfilled our joy tank.
So I just want to add one thing which we hadn't prepared in when we were putting it together, but it's for some people, the personality is exactly the opposite, where she by nature does her own things, he by nature does his own things. They actually don't do much. They enjoy each other, maybe on an intellectual level, maybe on an emotional level, on a sexual level, whatever it may be, but they essentially live two separate lives. They have to work the opposite way. Is they have to work to say, okay, I am whole on my own, but now I need to spend the time finding my other half. And I'm actually going to bring in, just because we're already at 8:55, time is flying, but I want to bring in, to talk a little bit about the physical intimacy and start with that from the psukim, from the verses. So let me make the screen a little bit smaller for me again. Can you guys see all the words? Okay, let me go to, okay. So this is when after Abraham finished giving the naming all the animals, and then he realizes that where is it? The human gave names to every livestock, animal, and bird of the sky, as well as the wild beast, but did not find among the animals any helper who was compatible for himself, whom God named Adam. This troubled him. So God did not want the human to witness its female side being severed from its male side. And just to clarify, people think that the world was created man, and then God created woman. When God created Adam, Adam was created as a male and female, one person, a he, she, if you will. So God is about to take the female portion out of the man. So God did not want the human to witness the female side being severed from its male side, for this may lead the male to disrespect the female. So God cast a deep sleep upon the human, and he slept. He then took one of its sides, the female side, off of the male side, and closed the cut closed the cut made in the flesh in its place. God built up that side that he had taken from the human into a woman, shaping her so that she could carry children within her. And he brought her to the man, Adam, and his wife, whom he would later name Eve, were created as mature 20-year-old adults and were exceptionally tall by later standards. That's not as important for what we're saying. But this piece is this next verse is important. The man said, this time, in contrast to all the creatures I examined previously, this one is bone from my bones and flesh from my flesh. She will be called woman, Isha, because she was taken from man, from Ish, and thus Adam completed the process of naming all creatures. For me, I found this piece to be really very fascinating, because when it comes to physical intimacy, going back to TV, as we were saying before, the TV mode is all about let me just put this back here. The TV mode is all about how can I get? How can I, be, the man in the bedroom? He's always about taking and what can he, conquering the woman and doing whatever. But it's not about, it's not focused so much on the emotional intimacy and the romance and the relationship. And if you look at this story with Adam and Eve, what really happened was Eve, Chava, was actually part of Adam. She started off as part of him, or they started off as a they. And once she was taken away from him, or taken away from that part, and where he then became man and she became woman, they became two separate beings. He began to chase what he didn't have anymore. He wanted that piece of her back. He wanted her to be back part of him because that's what he knew in his whole state. But now he doesn't have this. And what happens is he needs to find her, and he needs to pursue her, and he needs to bring her back into that state of oneness. And as we were talking before, how does he get to that place of bringing her back? Is first realizing he's no longer him and her, he's him. And she's no longer him and her, she's her. And they're now two separate beings. But those two separate beings want to connect as one. And that is why in these circumstances, in the bedroom, the man has to build up the woman and build up that relationship. And once he builds up that relationship, she essentially responds and says, okay, I'm happy to be one with you. I'm happy to be a unified being with you. And that's when they become one. And the truest way of showing out that oneness is when you have children, because the children are the epitome of you, both of you, in one being. And I think that that's really the message of how do you have oneness, is by first recognizing you've left your parents' home. You've become you. You've become totally healthy. I do a lot of counseling, and one of the things that I tell people a lot is they say, oh, all I want is that my marriage is great. And I say, well, before you get to your marriage, first make sure that you're great. Are you confident with yourself? Are you comfortable with yourself? Are you a whole person within yourself? Because you can't have a healthy marriage unless you have a healthy self. And then once you're healthy by yourself and your spouse is healthy by herself, then you can come together and become one unified being.
Yeah, I want to say that about the physical intimacy. I speak to women sometimes, and they say I feel so bad. My husband wants to be together, and I'm like, hello, we need to have emotional intimacy first. Like, we need to connect. And I'm like, no, you don't feel bad. It's meant to be that way, that women need emotional intimacy because we need to bring that out on our husbands. Like, our husbands need to learn how to slow down and see us as a real person and build emotional intimacy and learn how to talk and learn how to connect and cherish us and value us and respect us and give to us. Like, true intimacy is the man gives to the woman. The woman is the receiver. Our bodies are like that, you see, like the man gives and the woman receives. And that's a physical manifestation of the reality. Is like, it's not that the man owns the woman and the woman needs to perform for the man, which is very messed up understanding of intimacy. It's really, the man needs to refine himself enough to be like, I want you, I want to give to you, I want to pleasure you. Actually, in Jewish law, there's man needs to pleasure the wife. Otherwise, it's not considered intimacy. So I just want to say, like, I mean, as you could add more to that, but wait, I just want to say that we better act like we get along after all we're saying. No, but what I want to say is that for a woman, that a woman needs to know that the man needs to do his work to treat his wife with respect and with love and as a full, like, that she's worthy of being given to. But a woman needs to also know that she's worthy of being seen as a whole person and being worthy of being cherished and treated with respect and worthy of having emotional intimacy and worthy of being taken care of with that kind of respect. And like, we also have to do our work to know that, like, we're the receivers of love and we're worthy of it. Like, we live in a society now that like women, like we're just like men and we're tough and we don't need anyone and like we're gonna prove ourselves, and like that's great, but we're the ones hurting ourselves, because the truth is like we don't have to have it all figured out. We don't have to be perfect, and we do need love, and it's good to be taken care of and nurtured, and we're worthy of it, and we're worthy of being cherished and pleasured, and like, you know, and women need to step into that energy too, because it can't only be the man. Like it has to be this a dance together.
I just want to add, so it's 9:04, and I don't want to keep anybody too late, but I want to add
I
on.
probably should do questions.
I want to leave with I want to share one more verse, and then and which I think really ties into what Nahama just said. This is talking about when you know, back in the times of the Torah, when a man would take a second wife. In those days, concubines were allowed, and it says in the verse there, if he takes another wife for himself, he shall not diminish her sustenance, her clothing, or her marital relations. So it's an interesting question. It's like, why is it her marital relations? It's their marital relations. He shouldn't diminish it. Why is it it's specified that it belongs to her? And this really ties into what we were saying, is that when it comes to the relationship, and this is kind of we could go on to a whole long discussion about this. The man's job is to give the woman the pleasure that she deserves. It's all about her, and once she is feeling complete, then they can feel complete together. And really, that's why it's really about her benefit, not about his. And again, we could go into that in a long.
Well, I'll just say that ties into where it says that one of the first passages that we read, that a man needs to leave his mother and father's home, because like in order for a man to really get to that level where he's even with intimacy that he's giving, he needs to really grow up and be a man. And as long as he's seeking pleasure for himself and using his wife to satisfy him, he's still that little boy looking for that love and that reassurance and validation that he's okay. Now, yeah, we'll open up to questions. I want to just, there's a lot of things I said, and I want to just give three little tips. They're not little, they're big, but I'm going to say them little, that will help with emotional intimacy that Ezzy and I have discovered that match up with everything we shared. So one is, when you get triggered, it's going to happen. Like our spouse does naturally trigger us because we love them, we need them, we live with them, and energetically they remind us of our parents. It's just how it is. The best tip that we've discovered that has helped our relationship so much is when we're upset at the other person, instead of having it out at the moment, you know, calling names and getting upset and hash it out. Like we've discovered that, like when Ezzy upsets me, I go to my room, I go on a walk, I go outside, and I don't talk to him about it. I ask myself, what's coming up for me? What is this reminding me of? Why am I so upset? And always it's there to release something in me. It's there to show me something and teach me something and remind me of something. And when I do the work and I own my own trigger and my own upset and do not talk to him about it, and like do the crying that I need, call a girlfriend, call a sister, like work it out separate from him. And then like when I'm calm and I see what I need to work, and then if it's something that actually matters in a couple years and it's something that like whatever, then I can mention it again in iMessages. I'm not freaking out anymore. I'm not upset, and just say, you know, this is something that bothered me. But first, each partner has to own their own stuff first and not talk when you're triggered, because there's stuff that you need to own for yourself. Number two, drop the rules and the expectations. You know, you're going on a date night or it's the end of the day and you're sitting on the couch. You know, there's no rules about, if you want emotional intimacy, show up authentically. And, you know, sometimes your husband will share something or you'll share something and it's like too intense, it's too deep, it's lame, it's weird, you don't relate. But you know what? You want emotional intimacy, you want him to hear you listen to him. He listens to you, you listen to him. Like the same way you would listen to a friend. If you really cared about your friend, you would hear them out. If you want emotional intimacy, you need to create space for each other's brains, each other's hearts, each other's interests, and make that space, because you make space for him, he'll make space for you. It's just that you don't make space for one the other, there's not going to be space for you. It opens up the communication and the ability to really build emotional intimacy. And the third thing is
Watch the
put away your phone for at least an hour every evening. It's so important. And what I'll say is that, honestly, like,
Watch The Social Dilemma. That's most important.
honestly, like, even if, and men, put away your phone. Even if you don't end up speaking to each other, and like, let's say you put away your phone and you're like, you say to your spouse, look, I put away my phone, you're not here. It doesn't matter. By you putting away your phone for 1 hour every evening, you're creating a space that's possible for emotional intimacy, that's possible to be filled. It's called open time. I'm not looking at my email. I'm not checking my phone. I'm just here. Take a bath, get in pajamas, relax, and don't have rules. We don't have to talk. If you're in a bad mood or you're not in the mood of laughing or cuddling, you don't have to. But if you put away your phone for an hour every evening, it will open up a channel for emotional intimacy over time. Those are my tips. And let's open up if anyone has any questions or thoughts or feedback. Oh, next time we're talking about in 2 weeks, we're talking about how to have healthy communication.
Elise, you have to unmute. I'm going to unmute everybody.
It's not recording anymore.
Get it. How do we unmute you? There we go. I don't know how to, I'm going to stop sharing. Maybe that's stop share. Maybe that.
We're trying to unmute. Well, maybe someone else can talk meanwhile.
But everybody can unmute themselves if they want.
Yeah, everyone could unmute yourself. Right? Could everyone unmute themselves?
Yeah.
Okay, so you could jump in. Does anyone want to share anything? We floored everybody.
I wish we had that perspective after 15 years of marriage that you have now.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Just a wonderful insight you have. It's so emotionally mature.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Anyone else?
Actually, I have a lot to say, but I'll tell you guys in private because I don't want to keep everybody on here. But this was really lovely. You guys did such a great job.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. You know how this class was put together? Yeah, I mentioned this to Karen earlier in the week. Nechama and I kept on saying, we have to sit down, we have to plan it. At a certain point, Nechama said, "I'm going to plan it. You just show up." And I said, "Okay." And that's how it all worked out. I added in my own parts, but
Well, actually,
it's a partnership.
I'm so grateful because we were thinking like, oh my gosh, what do we say? And I really, actually Sunday morning, I went outside to my backyard and I was like really quiet with myself. And I'm like, Nechama, no one needs your like dogma or like looking up some like marriage class. Just like sit down and write your heart and just share like what you've learned along the way. So thank you for all of you for making me feel comfortable to do that, for both of us to share. And I truly believe like the world will be a better place if all of us just show up and share our soul and share our stories and share our secrets and our wisdom and our lessons, because we all have so much to share. And like, no one needs some intellectual, like written script. We all need each other. The more we open up and share vulnerably, the more the world will like be a better place. So if I can share my soul and help you, like you learn from that and share your souls with others, like that's what we all need to do.
All right, if you guys are all going to be quiet, then we're going to have to end. But feel free to reach out during the week. You can email or message us on WhatsApp. And we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks for
healthy communication. And I will say, if you want the recording, it was recorded. And lastly, we're doing 3 more of these. So please tell your friends, tell them that it's not a typical class, so that they know what they're coming to.
All righty. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Much.
Thank you. for coming.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're right.